The movie was finished in 71. We finally got a distributor in 73.
Are you freaking out for 2 years?
When Cars, oh yeah.
Welcome to Discograffiti, the podcast that gives Gen X music maniacs a chance to smell like teen spirit again by connecting with a brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebro, and with 3 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on John Landis in part 1 of our brand new 6-episode series called the John Landis Tapes, in which the director of such classics as Animal House, Coming to America, The Blues Brothers, Michael Jackson's Thriller video, and much, much more gives up the goods about his films and shares priceless behind-the-scenes anecdotes. And we're here with today's co-host, Joe Kennedy, as well as the man himself, my friend, John Landis. In the next hour, we'll learn about the torrent of classic European films on which John worked in every possible capacity in the 1960s, his experiences attending both the Tammy Show and Monterey Pop, and finally, the real story behind the making of his first feature film, Schlock, and the unexpected support from a truly massive celebrity that wound up kickstarting his career. Okay, first things first, you need to know just how seriously I take this craziness. Discograffiti is heavily researched, and the music is always reassessed with fresh ears. We don't just cover albums. We do a searingly honest deep dive analysis of all EPs, singles, comp tracks, relevant solo work, and sometimes bootlegs and live stuff. Every release is slapped with an objectively accurate star rating between 0 and 5, which allows us all, the real reason we do this, the Tootsie Pop reward at the center of the rock and roll lolly, to come face to face with the true shape of an artist's overall arc. Be sure to follow along with us chronologically as we go. The link to our legendary playlist is right there in the show notes. Coming up, we've got the remaining 2 volumes in our We Are Stardust, We Are Over series, the Keith Hartley Band and Quill, and much, much more. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and click follow. And get ready to meet your new friends. They're all kicking it right now in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, great artist and track recommendations, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and show topic decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for your next collaborator, and much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And away we go then. Today's episode's going to be a little bit different, so settle in and prepare yourselves for a career-long overview of John Landis' own output. Discograffiti presents Filmograffiti. Welcome to a very special episode, The John Landis Story. Our guest today is known for his groundbreaking work in multiple genres, including comedy, horror, and long-form video. He's directed about 25 films, including a 10-year streak that almost nobody in film history has equaled, in my objective opinion. His work includes Animal House, The Blues Brothers, Michael Jackson's Thriller video, Coming to America, and Into the Night. I love him, as I'm quite sure you will too. Ladies and gentlemen, John Levitsky, a.k.a. John Landis.
Now you have to change that.
What?
I was never John Levitsky.
What the hell's that then? I thought that was your goddamn name when you were born.
No.
What's John Levitsky?
There is no John Levitsky.
Tell me about what is John Levitsky?
Levitsky was my great-great-grandparents' name.
Okay. All right.
But my grandfather changed it. No,
okay.
My great-grandfather changed it so that my grandfather could get into law school. You needed a Goyish name to get in. There was a Jew quota at the time. No. That's the truth.
You were actually, okay, there's a bunch of stuff that a lot of people who know your work or know you know very well about you, which is that you are a Chicago guy, born in Chicago, but at 4 months old, you went out to L.A. With your dad, Marshall, your mom, Shirley. Is that correct?
I was under 1,
okay.
But I don't know. I couldn't vouch for 4 months.
Okay, now your mom, you made her even more mythological than you because a lot of people don't know that joke in Airplane, which is truly a legendary joke, was sort of a gift to your mom, was it not? You want to tell us about that?
My mother's name was Shirley, and we always would say, that whole Shirley gag in Airplane is something we did with my mother forever. In fact, years later when she broke her hip and she walked with a walker, we would say, "Here she comes, slowly but surely."
Shirley, you can't be serious. Yes, I am. Don't call me Shirley.
Just to rewind for a second before we delve into every single detail about your existence thus far, you and I
should clarify, I didn't make Airplane. That was made by Jerry, David, and Jim.
Right, but it is one of the most famous jokes from the movie and most quoted, very possibly. So, full disclosure, you and I know each other. We met and actually started talking in 2003. I reached out to you because the film I was making at the time, Zombie Honeymoon, I had a feeling that you would respond to it. And I got to say, you were a true mensch. I mean, you didn't have to take, I faxed a letter to your manager. You didn't have to call me. You called me the next day.
To my lawyer.
To your lawyer,
I've
whatever.
Never had a manager.
Whomever it was.
This is why they called me mythological.
So you helped me along the way. You got me my first distribution offer through Blue Underground and Bill Lustig. Then you and I actually went to Italy to the Torino Film Festival. And, you really helped me out along the way. Plus, just having you as a mentor figure along the way, when the chips were down, and filmmaking is certainly an up and down process, it really helped me through. Thank you. And moving right along now, you're now in L.A. You see Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. This is the big inspiration for you. You decide to become a filmmaker. The first step along the way is becoming a mail boy at 20th Century Fox. Is that correct?
I just wanted to be near production, to get anywhere near making movies. And the only job I could get was a mail boy at Fox.
So did you see this as your way in, or you just kind of wanted to be on the periphery, so to speak?
There's no way in. I mean, what's interesting is when people talk about my career, it always sounds like the military. You always hear he worked his way up. There's no working your way up.
No, you zigzagged all over the place.
No, but it doesn't work like that. I mean, how do you become a director? Well, somehow there's the money for you to direct. I mean, there's no steps. Like if you wanted to be a plumber, that you go and you learn
a trade.
Trade,
mm-hmm.
Right. If you want to be a doctor, you learn the trade. If you want to be a filmmaker, there is no right or wrong way to learn the skills or the craft.
I learned by fucking up so bad.
Well, that's how people learn.
That's a way.
Yeah, that's how people
really
learn
bad.
Everything.
No, I mean, I like you, I butted heads with schools. So I was suspended from college and just went and made a feature called Jesus 2, partially financed with bar mitzvah money, also partially financed by $40,000 on credit cards. And we had to shut down production in the middle. I know what not to do. You know what I mean? So during this time,
I just wanted to be near actual production, to learn everything I could. And over the years, you can't do what I did now, really, because there was production. I went to Europe on a movie, and I was able to. There was what was called the spaghetti boom in Spain at the time.
Before we get there.
Well, no, I was just saying I was able to get on all kinds of movies: American, British, French, Spanish, German, Italian. I have done every job on a film except hair. And that's how I sort of learned the craft.
That's incredible to me because you were very well coiffed. Was that the inspiration to drop out of high school? I know what I want to do, it's just time to start doing it. And looking back, you still feel the same way about that decision?
Well, I'm the classic bad example because I one, I'm sure the diagnosis didn't exist then, but I'm sure I was ADHD. I used to get bizarre grades. I would get A's in history and A's in English and F's in math. I still am dreadful at anything that involves math. So one of the things about music that fascinates me is when I worked with film composers is when I really realized, wait a minute, music is math.
Yeah, they're very closely related.
Yeah, we're like, holy shit. No wonder I'm not a musician. But interestingly enough, I've been told by a lot of amazing people that I'm privileged to have worked with Jerry Goldsmith, Elmer Bernstein, Peter Bernstein. I'm trying to think. Nile Rodgers, so many great composers. And they've all told me that I have perfect rhythm. And I think, and I don't know what that is, but what's interesting about that is it does help because even rhythm is math.
And editing. Editing is math.
Well,
I mean, if you can't strip away what you're seeing and just feel the organic underlying rhythm of the scene, then you're...
Yes, but I wouldn't say editing is math. It can be. You can cut. Edgar Wright, famously, if you look at his movies, he's very much cutting the music. I mean,
Baby Driver.
Yeah. But if you see his new one,
Last Night in Soho,
there's a couple of sequences in the first half that are basically musical numbers, but they're remarkable in how they're shot and assembled. And that's all math, really. But I could never approach it that way because I'd get intimidated. I could just do it. It's interesting. It's like when I'm on a film set, I know the sight lines. I mean, I really know stuff that I just have in my head. Like I'm always telling art directors and production designers, build me a model of the set. Because if you show me a drawing, I can't figure it out.
Right. You know what's interesting? Sight lines were always a pain in the ass to me.
I've worked on so many films where there are arguments between the operator and the cameraman and the continuity person. It's like, no, he looks that way. No, he looks that way.
I hate
that.
I
remember twice, I've made a lot of movies. I've shot a lot of footage, but in all kinds of commercials, whatever it is, but twice. Once on Blues Brothers, I think once on Trading Places, where nobody on the crew agreed where that car should go. So we ended up shooting it twice. And then figuring it out in the cutting room because in the Blues Brothers, there's a shot where the car comes off the freeway. It's during Soothe Me, the Sam and Dave. There's a lot of that movie that was designed around the needle drop that's playing at the time. It was I just couldn't. It was the arm across an exit ramp as the car's coming off. We couldn't figure it out. Like, wait, does it go this way? And finally, let's shoot it both ways.
So L.A. in the 60s. It seems like it had much more small town kind of feel than
Westwood Village did. Mm-hmm. I don't know about L.A., but the thing about L.A., I like Randy.
You love this town, correct?
Like Randy Newman. I love L.A.
I love this town too.
Yeah, it's deeply crazy and completely unique, and that I did not realize until I traveled. And I like traveling. My wife and I are like great tourists, and we go everywhere.
And now that you're being feted internationally, it's just a natural fit.
You know, when I'm being honored at a festival, it's always where is it and when is it? It's basically about free travel.
Yeah.
Oh, no, then? Nah. Or there? Nah. It's how I get tickets to Europe or tickets to Asia. But in any case, my friend Paul Bartel was a director.
Love Paul Bartel. You were in Eating Raoul, were you not?
I am briefly, but Eating Raoul, I forgot what picture. But it was a studio picture, so the film that he shot, Eating Raoul, was paid for by that studio. We ordered it and gave it to Paul.
I love that movie.
He was a wonderful guy.
So, okay.
Anyway, my point was he spent years just traveling, going to film festivals all over. Where's Paul? Sao Paulo. Where's Paul? Ethiopia. Where's Paul? Venice. He just went to film festivals. It's very much like my dear friend and hero, Ray Harryhausen. After he retired, Ray spent a good 15 years, maybe 20, just being feted.
Yeah, it's a good golden parachute.
Just
kind of
being
aspect.
feted, just traveling and being feted. And I thought, good for him.
So many gift baskets.
a little nicer than that.
All right, so you're 14 years old, okay? And you go to this show called the Tammy Show.
Oh, okay.
All right, so there's a famous movie, the Tammy Show, and you're in the goddamn movie. So,
Well, no. I'm in the audience. You see.
you're in the movie, aren't you not?
You can see me if
Yeah.
you know where to look, but it doesn't matter. I'm just one other little screaming kid. But the thing about the Tammy Show was I went to Emerson Junior High, which was L.A. public school, right behind the Mormon Temple is Emerson, still there. And because of the area it was in, which includes Bel Air and Westwood, a lot of industry kids were there. It was a very strange school because we had black kids bussed in from Watts. We had mostly white. It was about 45% white, about 20% black, and 20% Hispanic. It was actually a good mix of kids.
Who were you most excited to see? I'm
Well,
guessing it was James
I
Brown.
wasn't excited to see them then, but like in my class was David Cassidy, and Bonnie Raitt was the grade ahead of me. My sisters, who also went to Emerson, they went on to uni, the high school. I did not. But my sister was in the same class with Natalie Cole and Liza Minnelli. And I remember, I never met her or saw her, but my mother being so excited when Judy Garland came to pick up Liza and spent the night. You're talking about she was probably 14,
Mm-hmm.
My mother was like, Judy Garland's outside.
When you went to the show, do you remember
Well, I was going to say there were all these really talented kids in my school. There was one boy named Gene Rudolph, who was a real, like Gavone. I mean, a real. In gym, he was the first guy I ever saw who had hair on his balls. It was like, whoa. His big brother was Johnny Rivers, and we all went to see Johnny Rivers at the Whiskey A Go Go, singing "Secret Agent Man." Anyway, somebody in Emerson, their dad was involved in producing the Tammy Show, which was Teenage America Music International. And it was shot, they came up with some silly word for it, but it was shot.
It was like something vision. Something,
Yes, vision.
Something like
But it was-
electrovision.
Yeah, it was shot to be projected in theaters. And something went wrong, and they ended up having 16 millimeter cameras too, to make kinescopes if they had to. But all I know is they did shoot the show, and it's directed by the same guy who directed the famous Elvis special.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the show itself?
Very well.
Who do you remember most?
What I remember most was James Brown.
Right.
But also what I remember was the idea that you had, Marvin Gaye, Chuck Berry, the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean, Diana Ross, and the Supremes. You had
and the Stones legendarily
The Rolling Stones.
and shakily.
Well, I'm trying to think. It was an amazing.
Jan and Dean were on there.
Jan and Dean were the host. You had
Leslie Gore.
Well, that was the point. Of all those acts, the biggest star was Leslie Gore.
Yeah, she was
Really?
hot. She was hot right at that
She
time.
was
That
the
time, really?
biggest star. And in
Interesting.
fact, if you look at the Tammy Show, you see her singing and all those people behind her dancing, and she was the number one star, which was kind of amazing.
I wonder if our friend Don Randy was in the band on that show, because
very
the
well
band
could have
is all Wrecking Crew. It's Hal
The
Blaine.
Wrecking Crew.
It's Hal Blaine
And
and
you know
Tommy
who
Tedesco.
one of the Go-Go girls is Tony Basil, and one of the Go-Go girls is Terry Garr.
Oh, man.
Nice, nice.
See,
But
you
I
gotta
was-
love this town.
I
So
was
good.
younger than them, but the show was very exciting. They did it twice. They cut between shows, but one audience is like the 7th and 8th grade, and one audience is like the 8th and 9th grade.
I hadn't seen it in a while, and I watched some of it last night. And,
It's the best footage of James Brown performing
yeah,
live.
that's amazing.
It's
the Chuck,
great,
the
yeah.
Chuck Berry footage is pretty great.
Yeah.
It's pretty like
The
raw.
Stone
like,
stuff is pretty limp. I mean, it's
It sounded
actually
pretty good to me.
Well, you
it
could
just
tell
think
that
of-
story.
I mean, after watching James Brown,
That's
it's
the
just funny.
story. Mick Jagger tells a funny story about it, but he insisted that they be the ending act, the closing act. And James Brown said, "Excuse me, I'm the closing act." So they had the director, I can't think of his name, I'm embarrassed, but he called them all together And he said, look, you put me in this weird position. You're both demanding to be the closing act. And James famously looked at Mick Jagger and said, oh, this is, okay, let him be the closing act. And then James comes out and just blows the roof off.
Yeah.
And then after James Brown, the Rolling Stones, now they were big stars because of Ed Sullivan. We knew who they were. But it was like hoodie skinny white boys. It was like...
You know what's interesting about you is that you kind of excuse yourself from being, somebody who's had a profound effect on music. You kind of like move away from that a little bit. But the funny thing is, you're like a stone skipping over a pond because you hit all these... You got the Tammy Show, then you're at Monterey Pop.
I was extremely fortunate to be at Monterey
What's
Pop.
the story with Monterey Pop? Because you are the farthest fucking thing from a hippie I've ever met.
I beg your pardon. No, I was not a hippie, but I was hippie-ish. I had long hair.
Was it your idea or a girl's idea to go?
No, I went with a boy. I went with a guy.
Did you paint your face?
No.
What did you wear accoutrement-wise?
What I always wore, I wore jeans and a shirt.
A blazer?
No, but I wasn't a real hippie. But most of the people there were not real hippies. It was still that.
Right.
When I saw the one real hippie thing I went to that was totally hippie, was seeing the Mamas and the Papas at the Hollywood Bowl go, and that was the Summer of Love. That was 67. I remember.
That was August 18th, 1967. That was the day you saw it.
I took a girl named Kathy Zoitlin. And
Zoitlin! It sounds like a Jerry Lewis thing.
It was memorable for a bunch of reasons. One, because the stench of marijuana, the wall of marijuana, like you got within a mile of the Hollywood Bowl, you were stoned, and we go, and every seat in the Hollywood Bowl, Mama Cass had paid for a baby orchid to be on it. And everyone was blowing bubbles and, incense and Hare Krishna and all this stuff. And the opening act, talk about hippie, the opening act was Scott McKenzie singing, If You're Going to San Francisco. And then came a guy that that had to be before Monterey Pop because
It was after. It was 2 months after. But the Monterey Pop movie had not come out yet. That's
okay,
really
because Jimi Hendrix came on and nobody knew who he was. And he started to play really loud the opening chords of Sgt. Pepper. Mm-hmm. And he's playing that, and the audience just went, boo. Well, first of all, they're all stoned. Second of all, it's what the fuck? They're going, what is this? And they just booed, and he played most of the song, and then he took his guitar off and just threw it high in the air and walked off, and it smashed on the stage and made noise. And I remember very well the next day in the LA Times was a review of the concert, and it said, Mr. Hendrix, who was not received favorably, threw his guitar in the air and walked off stage. I'm told normally he sets it on fire. And I remember reading that going, what? See, that's why I'm interested, because I saw him at Monterey Pop.
Right, I was going to ask if you had seen him at Monterey Pop.
I did. So in my head, I'm confused.
And oddly, you had seen Mamas and Papas at Monterey Pop. So that was the summer of your obsession with the Mamas and Papas.
No, I don't know, but they were great. But
I loved the Mamas and Papas.
And apparently Hendrix also got poorly received at Monterey Pop because Mama Cass lectured the audience.
Well, at Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, that was Hollywood Bowl.
The Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, I see.
So the Mamas and the Papas come on, and Mama Cass started by saying, you people, and she scolded the audience. She said, this man's a genius, and you're going to regret this. And she was really stern. She was like wagging her finger.
She was right.
And she was right.
Right, yeah.
But the Monterey Pop CD, the film, I think it's Pennebaker. I forgot.
It's Pennebaker.
Pennebaker. He did a wonderful thing. He took the Jimi Hendrix set, but especially the Otis Redding set, and they're separate, their whole acts. And the Otis Redding, that for me was life change. I've seen Sinatra. I worked with Michael Jackson. I worked with David Bowie. I've worked with everybody, and I've seen a lot of great performers. Oh, that was one of the great shows I've ever seen. Period. And ironically, it wasn't until I was shooting the Blues Brothers that I realized, wait a minute, Steve, didn't you write Dock of the Bay with Otis Redding? He goes, yeah. And I knew that Steve and Duck Dunn were the MGs for Booker T and the MGs. I knew they were a house band at Stax.
Yeah.
But I didn't really realize the depth of their, recording. And I realized they were in the band. And I went back to look. I got the DVDs and I looked at them in Chicago. We were shooting to see, oh my God, look, there they are.
So it changed your life. And then 13 years later, you're working with these guys.
Steve is still out there. He just came out with a record. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And Duck Dunn has passed. But Duck always had this pipe, and it's a brilliant bass. Brilliant. Mm-hmm. There was a recording that we did of Peter Gunn, and just listen to Duck. I mean, it's incredible. And when Henry Mancini told me that he made more money from that recording than any other. But what's the the Beatles song where at the end of it, John goes, I've got blisters on
That's
me.
a Helter Skelter.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
Ringo.
because that's
It's
what
Ringo.
It's Ringo. Yeah. I always thought it was Lennon. But what's amazing was Duck was that dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. He's playing two different chords for 4 minutes, and it's like, oh my God. Anyway, Duck, we were shooting in Hollywood at Universal on a stage, and it was really hot. And all of a sudden, Duck turns. Duck was a good old boy. He turns and he goes, throw another log on the air conditioner. Anyway.
All right, so now it's 1968, and you become
I saw Janis Joplin.
At Monterey Pop.
Monterey Pop. I saw.
Well, you saw the Association. You saw Buffalo
remember.
Springfield. You saw Moby Grape.
I saw who? Moby Grape. I don't know. I don't remember.
The Who, remember them? They were there.
Yeah, The Who I remember because they smashed the shit out of it.
So it's 1968, okay? Give me some clarification here, because from what I see, for 3 years, you were an itinerant wanderer in Europe.
Well,
okay, you worked on Once Upon a Time in the West, Kelly's Heroes, El Condor, A Town Called Bastard, and Red Sun.
Yes,
Is
but
that
not all within those 3 years.
It was all within those 3 years. I'm sorry.
Once Upon a Time in the West?
Yes.
What year
Once Upon a
was
Time
that?
in the West was 1968.
Oh, okay.
Kelly's Heroes 70, El Condor 70.
No, Kelly's Heroes was 1969.
It came out in 70.
So what? They shot it in 1969.
Okay. And then
it's weird when people say dates of movies. They're always like when they were released.
When it came out, yeah.
Yeah.
But during that time, you're doing all kinds of stuff. You're meeting people that you would go on, a lot of these guys, to work with. I mean, you got Donald Sutherland, Don Rickles.
I worked on a movie called Shadow's Land. Michael Winter was the director. It was Charles Bronson. Actually, impressive cast. Really silly movie, a Western. But the DP was Robert Painter, British DP, and Michael Winter, he shot like 12 or 14 movies, 15 movies for Michael. Michael Winter was a famous character who could be extremely unpleasant to the crew. I thought he was very funny. It was like Mr. Toad directing a movie. He had a big cigar.
What do you...
Brandy sifter.
We're talking about...
Well, because what I'm saying is the DP, Bob Painter. So now I'm coming to England and to make An American Werewolf in London... 1980.
80. Well, 81 it comes out.
That was 1981.
Yeah.
So I need a British DP. I mean, had to be British crew. So I thought, I'll call Bob. I mean, a lot of people I worked with in Europe, I worked with again and again.
Right.
But they all knew me. It was funny.
Why didn't you work with Jack Elam? I mean, did you see the way he gives the finger in Cannonball Run? That guy's classic, great actor.
Was funny.
We have kind of an obsession with Cannonball Run.
You know how he gives
Have you
the
ever
finger
seen
like
Support
this?
Your Local Sheriff?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's a James Garner comedy.
From the early 70s, right?
From the, 70s. But it's shot in Hollywood. But Support Your Local Sheriff actually is pretty funny. Bruce Dern and Walter Brennan. And Jack Elam plays the drunken deputy.
What are you...
And at the end of the movie, in Support Your Local Sheriff, if you're a Jack Elam fan, at the end, he's on the back of a train. And the train's moving away. slowly at first and then goes fast. But so he goes away, but he starts off by saying, well, this is what happened to James Garner and to this guy and this character and this character and me. And he looks right in the camera as he's receding. He goes, I went to Spain and became a star in them there spaghetti westerns. And that's the end of the movie.
So during this time, the 3 years, what are you picking up?
Mostly the trash. You know,
So,
I was
you had
low level on this.
But you're watching Sergio Leone work. You're watching Clint Eastwood work. You're watching Fernando Rey.
To this day.
Who, by the way, you and I both love Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie.
That's Louis Buñuel that stars Fernando Rey.
Right.
Clint
Toshiro Mifune
Mifune.
kills you
Yeah.
in a movie.
To this day, if I see Clint Eastwood, which I do occasionally at functions and stuff, he'll say, John or Landis, get me some coffee or get me a sandwich.
Do you do it for old time's sake?
No.
So, okay, I'm going to just go down a list of names who kind of winds up having more of a profound impact on you, okay? Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson, Jason Robards, Don Rickles, Donald Sutherland, Lee Van Cleef, Martin Landau. Any of these people?
Martin Landau?
Yes,
he was in El Condor.
He was in A Town Called Bastard.
And he was in a town, but wasn't he in El Condor? No.
It's possible, but he was definitely in A Town Called Bastard.
Town Called Bastard. I just
So,
remember that
okay,
was
so you
terrible.
spend, are you?
Okay, I became friends with Donald Sutherland, and he did me a favor of being in Kentucky Fried Movie.
And then you did him a favor of being in Animal House.
Well, he did me a favor of being in Animal
But
House.
ultimately, you did him a favor.
Well,
You
he's
did.
still, you know that story? The studio was very upset with my cast because I cast mostly unknowns. And the only names were John Belushi, and he was television, and John Vernon, and he was, on the downside of his career. Although I cast John Vernon because, have you ever seen Outlaw Josie Wales?
Yes, great movie. Great movie.
He's got this black beard and these blue eyes, and he's the bad guy, and he's one of the bad guys, and he's got a close-up where he says, don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. And when I saw that, I went, Dean Wormer! Because, Wormer's tons of dialogue like, the time has come for someone to put their foot down, and
that foot is me. Yeah.
Right? No more fun of any kind. Anyway, Don Rickles and Donald Sutherland, I had long relationships with.
Right.
And the story that I'm amazed you don't know about Animal House is the studio basically said, Karen Allen, Kevin Bacon, who the fuck are these people? Tim Matheson, he was on The Quest. What happened was the studio wouldn't give me a green light on Animal House, and we were in pre-production. We'd done all this work. We cast. We did everything. And I was told, you have no movie stars. We need a movie star. And this is 1977, 78. Mm-hmm. So the only movie star I really could ask, I thought, well, Donald did me the favor in Kentucky Fried, so fuck it, I'll call him. It turned out he was going to shoot Invasion of the Body Snatchers for Phil Kaufman.
Love that fucking
in San
movie.
Francisco, and we were going to be north of that in Eugene, Oregon. So I said, Don, can't you carve out a day or something? And he said, John, I'm happy to do you a favor, but this is Universal. This isn't you guys, this is Universal, so I got to get paid. So Universal offered him $35,000 for what's called a day plus one, meaning 2 days. And he said no. So they said, okay, $35,000, and I think it was like 12 net points. And he said no. So they ended up paying him, I think, $50,000 or $60,000 for a day plus one, and he said yes. So he flew up. I had him 2 days. He flew up one day and flew back to San Francisco, worked another week, and then flew up another day. And the genius of Doug Kenny, who was up there, I remember I said,
For those who don't know, Doug Kenny is a major player in the National Lampoon.
And one of the he was a very important historic figure, and he was one of the writers of Animal House, and two of the writers of Animal House, Chris Miller and Doug Kenny, were in Oregon with me, and it's a long story. Anyway, I said to Doug, I have Donald playing Jennings, the professor, and he ends up sleeping with Katie, so can you give me another scene, something I can shoot in half a day, just really quick? And he wrote, it's like the Gettysburg Address, on the back of an envelope, he wrote the scene where he's teaching, when we first meet him, where he's teaching about Milton. Yeah, and it's a great.
It is a great
scene.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Don flew up and did this. The movie comes out. He got his $60,000 or something. If he had taken the 35 and net points, there are no gross players on Animal House. He would have made at least $17 million. He still talks about it.
I love it. Hey lads and ladies, Dave Gebrow here. I abandoned my career and moved my family 3,000 miles to be able to focus exclusively on Discograffiti. And so if you're like me and enough is just never enough, then please visit patreon.com/Discograffiti and become one of our Patreon soldiers of sound. Discograffiti is an entirely listener-supported show, and it's also intended to be a 3 times a week music deep dive experience. So do us both a favor and consider giving it a shot. Trust me, I'm working hard for the money, so hard for it, honey. There's the main show on Friday, a Monday wildcard episode, which is either a soul-bearing interview with that week's special guest, or an offshoot show like Queasy Listening and Rock Cousteau. And then on Wednesdays, there's the humdinger of them all, Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major. You got nothing to lose. If you don't dig it after a month, you're refunded, no questions asked. Once again, that's patreon.com/Discograffiti. So you're obviously planting seeds out there. You got a Rolodex. 2 quick questions before we hit Schlock. Okay. So number 1, did Doug Kenny jump or did he fall?
I don't know.
Okay.
There are a lot of interesting.
What do you think?
I think he was doing a drug deal and he was probably murdered.
Okay.
Pushed off. But,
okay.
But
and also,
he could have jumped, he could have fell.
You know
did you see the documentary about National Lampoon?
Not documentary. I saw the one where it's a reenactment and everything.
No, that's a piece of shit. There's a documentary about the National Lampoon. And when they did it, I said to the guy, listen, this is going to end up being a documentary about Doug Kenny. And it pretty much came out, but it's a great documentary.
I'll definitely watch that. When I was a little kid, way before I should have been reading that stuff, I was on the shit end of the stick in terms of National Lampoon, because it was like 84, 85, and it was, they were selling tits basically at that point. But as a 13-year-old, it felt vaguely countercultural to me. All right, so what is the transition then between you peripatetically wandering around Europe and then coming back and making Schlock in 71?
I was, Brian Hutton, the director of Kelly's Heroes, who was very kind to me and pretty outrageous guy, but he was going to direct a movie called X, Y, and Z. And I think it was released as Z and Company. It was Elizabeth Taylor, Michael Caine, and Susanna York, I think. I know it was Elizabeth Taylor. But he was going to direct that in London, and he called me up. I was in Madrid, and he said, would you like to be my first AD? And I went, yes, which is really not the best way to become a director, but for me, it was like,
it's
wow.
It's a fucking thankless, horrible job.
It's not a horrible job. It can be a very
stressful,
creative, challenging job. And I'll tell you,
you're a lightning rod, basically.
You're in charge.
Yeah.
The first AD runs the set.
Right.
And a good first is the difference between a movie that goes well or badly.
It seems like the kind of thing, if you're really good at it, you get stuck doing it because you're too valuable.
You don't get stuck doing it. It's a very honorable and important job.
Yeah, people are just wanting to do that job.
Yes, very much.
To me, those people are crazy.
No, it's a very creative and difficult job, and a first can make a huge difference. They also are the ones who stage background action, and I mean they're very important in scheduling. And I mean, I had on Animal House, it was interesting because I was able to get some people I wanted into unions and stuff, but the studio gave me a cameraman, the studio gave me a first AD, and I was very resentful. And it turned out that I was lucky to have the people they gave me, especially the first, whose name was Cliff Coleman, who was like 6'4", shit kicker. I mean, a real cowboy. And this guy, I thought, oh God, I hate him. And like the first week or so I worked with him, I really thought, Jesus Christ. But I realized very quickly, this guy's saving me. I mean, he really knew his job and really knew how to run a set. And it really taught me a lot just how good he was and experienced, because just little things like the parade sequence. Mm-hmm. Well, when we did the parade, one, it was very cold, but it's supposed to be spring, so that was one thing. But two, we shot it in Cottage Grove, which is a small town in Oregon. It's where Buster Keaton made The General. Mm-hmm. And later they made Stand By Me, and a lot of movies were made there eventually. But Cottage Grove I was so excited. We went to find the wrecked train. So we did a radio promotion, local radio promotion, to get extras, We paid like 150 people. But I needed 1,000 people at least to fit, to really make. So we did this radio promotion. They had to be there like 9 or something. And we had about 2,000 people. And so I start go to my shot list. I start planning it. And Cliff looked at me and said, no, John, no, you shouldn't do this. I'm looking at him like, fuck you. Like, what do you mean? He goes, do every big shot you have. Even jump out of continuity, I don't care. Every big shot you have, because we're going to lose most of these people very soon. And he was absolutely right, because as the minutes went on, the glamour kind of dissipated. But I was able to get one of the last shots of the movie of total chaos was one of my first shots, And
down the alley with Doug
No,
Kenny?
that was easy. It was contained. No, I mean where you see
everything,
1,000 people running around, and there's the crane shot where you see the parade. And he really saved my ass, because I would have had 200 people and I had thousands. So just all the time he knew stuff, like, we'll shoot this first because look at the sun.
So getting back to Schlock.
So what happened was, I'll tell you, I was offered to be the first, but I go to London. I'm very excited. I go out to Shepperton. Go out to Shepperton. But it turned out, to get a work permit, I had to be a member of the Directors Guild of America. So how do I do that? So I fly from London to LA, and I go through this process, and basically I couldn't get in. There was no way to get in until finally they were beginning this program called the DGA trainee program, where you train. It's been going now for many years, but you start off as a third and you work up to a second, and then but it's all these steps and everything. And to get into that, they had this affirmative action stuff going, and so basically I could take a test, and if I aced the test and I got a high grade more than the other people taking the test, they would allow me to go to London and be a first, and then come back to LA and be a second, which for me at the time was great. I was like 21 or something. I said, great, that's great. I'm happy to do it. So I took the test, which I remember being so stupid. I remember multiple choice. A pan is a lateral camera move from right to left or left to right. B, a cooking utensil. C, a bad review. Just like, what? Anyway, I took the test and I aced it. And the president of the guild at that time was Robert Aldrich. And the president emeritus was Mervyn LeRoy. I'm so excited. I get back, you made the test. And so I called Brian, and I'm starting to go back to London. Because I'd been gone for 3 years, and I'm anxious to get back. And then I get a call, please come see Mr. Aldrich tomorrow. And I'm thinking, Robert Aldrich? Uh-oh. He's a famous hard ass. He made some great movies, The Dirty Dozen, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. He made a movie in Cottage Grove called Emperor of the North. Terrific movie.
Yeah, Ernest Borgnine.
Lee Marvin.
Is that that's the
hobos?
The fighting hobos?
It's a great film.
Crazy
and
fucking
Carradine.
movie.
Good movie.
Yeah.
Carrot and Borgnine's scary. And anyway,
There's some movies around that time that it's just like,
They're
I look
so
back and
violent.
I'm like, what? How the fuck did they make that? Night of the Lepus?
no, that was a terrible.
But I know, but it got made, is what I'm saying. There's
I
some
love that movie. With
crazy
they're
shit.
running, screaming, and you cut to rabbits.
It's killer rabbits.
Giant.
To do giant killer rabbits, but they filmed them as their normal rabbits. They just kind of did
They film them.
close-ups
They
or
film
something?
them on miniature sets, but all they did was to make them.
It's like the Incredible Shrinking Woman.
They
with
made
rabbits.
them. They made them. No, they were giant.
You were supposed to direct Incredible
They
Shrinking
made
Woman.
them. Yeah, they made them slow motion. It's terrible. Anyway, it's laughable.
You got 60 grand and you made a movie. How did you get the 60 grand?
Well, let me finish. What happened was I go to see Mr. Aldrich, and I'm very intimidated. But he turned out to be very nice, and he had the most extraordinary eyebrows. They were like Mephistophelian. There's a gag in a Jerry Lewis movie called The Errand Boy, when the boss of the mailroom is screaming in Jerry's face, and Jerry turns and looks at the camera, and his eyebrows are like this against his forehead. He had these incredible eyebrows. Anyway, and he informs me, regretfully and embarrassed, and Mervyn LeRoy sitting on a couch. I'm like, oh my God, Wizard of Oz. Mervyn LeRoy. Anyway, Little Caesar. I'm like, wow. They tell me, you are a high school dropout. Yes. You don't have a high school diploma. No. To qualify to take the test, you have to have a BA.
You had to settle to be a filmmaker?
And they were embarrassed, but I didn't qualify to take the test. Didn't matter how I did. Well, imagine I was furious. And I come out, and my friend Jim O'Rourke, James Cornelius Patrick O'Rourke, who became the producer of Schlock and who I met in Europe, he was a college football guy. Whenever we needed money, he'd seduce some rich woman. He really was a gigolo. Anyway, I've come out of the DGA building, and he said, come on, let's go to a movie. And we go to Hollywood Boulevard, see some triple feature, and we saw Trog, the Joan Crawford movie, Freddie Francis, which is one of the great, terrible movies.
Like I said, they were just making great shit
Well,
back then.
they still do make terrible movies. Anyway, Trog is appalling. And I was so angry at the time. I said, I could do that. Fuck them. I'll direct my own fucking movie. And I went home and wrote Schlock, which is very inspired by Trog. And Jim said, we could make this, so let's make this. So I had, from my savings, about $30,000, and
He matched it?
no, but he put in $5,000, and then I got the rest of the money from my family. My uncle gave me $10,000. We raised $60,000. How much
At the time, that's a lot.
Yeah.
No, to make a feature film.
I mean, to make a...
We shot 35 millimeter.
My first feature was The Homeboy, shot on 35 millimeter for $55,000. So you can do it. I mean, I did it on a 13-day schedule. How long was
12.
12?
But regardless, it was no money.
You met Rick Baker.
That's right, I met Rick
How the
Baker.
fuck did you meet that guy?
Well, I needed it was written to be a bad gorilla suit. It was supposed to be schlocky, And
Instead, you got the greatest gorilla suit of all time.
no, but I did get a good one.
At the time, it was...
I don't know, but I got a great one. But
Yeah.
it's not a gorilla, but I first went to John Chambers, who was a makeup artist famous for doing the Planet of the Apes movies. I knew John from when I was a mailboy at Fox. I knew all these makeup guys. I used to go hang out in there. They made Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
You were in it, or you were in Battle?
I'm in Battle, the last one. Anyway, John said, I could do that, but it'd be expensive. And I said, well, how much money? He said, well, I'll do a deal for you. Yeah. $200,000. I went, no. So he suggested I go to Don Post Studios in Burbank. Don used to make those rubber full head mask that were sold in the back pages of famous monsters and stuff.
He's like a consumer level Dick Smith.
Oh, far more commercial than that.
Yeah,
also, he was pretty successful, Don Post, and he made Gorilla, so he made all kinds of stuff. So I go to him, and he said 150,000, but he was doing me a favor. By the way, they were right. They were, and I couldn't, no, thank you. And as I was leaving, Don Post Jr. was painting a mask, and he turned to me, he said, there was a kid in here. And he goes to find it, and he brings me a card. It says Rick Baker, Monster Maker. And it has his mother's phone number, an address in Covina, where he was living. And I was 20, and Rick was... No, I was 21. Sorry, I was 21, and Rick was 20, or 19. In any case, he was still living at home. And
he was baking all the stuff in his mom's oven, wasn't he?
Yeah, in fact, all the molds for Schlock had to be able to fit in his mom's oven. And she complained, lovely woman, she complained for years that her pie smelled like foam bread.
Lucky her.
But anyway, so...
Did he have a mullet back then, or is it just...
He had very long hair then.
Yeah.
He never had a mullet.
So, okay, couple questions. Number one, is Schlock a good movie?
No.
Okay. Number two, objectively, my idea for Schlock 2, with you having the ape kept in a cage in your basement and it gets out and you're running all over Hollywood trying to track down the ape and get it back in your basement, is genius, and one day we'll revisit and consider
Is genius...
it. Genius is in quotes.
Who said that?
Objectively, me. I said it.
Objectively meaning...
He said it, then quoted himself saying it.
You mean objectively meaning objective?
Remember, I was pitching you a ton of...
It's a terrible idea.
It's a great idea because you need to circle back around
I
to
want you to include this in the program so people lose all respect for his opinions.
They lost respect the second I opened my mouth during episode 1. So what people don't realize, correct me if I'm wrong here, about your career is that you made Schlock in 71, and your appearance on the Carson show is really what unleashed it. Is Johnny Carson responsible for your career?
No.
No, but I mean, Schlock would have remained unreleased, no?
No, it would have been released.
How does a kid who makes a small movie...
It was different. First of all, it was a different time.
Sure.
And there was...
You're a little kid. Look, I saw a picture of you. You look like a baby. You had a turtleneck.
You mean on Carson?
You look 15. You don't look... you look young.
I had to lie when I was on Johnny Carson because the movie was finished in 71. We finally got a distributor in 73. And so...
Are you freaking out for 2 years?
When Carson... Oh, yeah. I still lost money. Anyway, when Carson booked me, I was booked as a 21-year-old filmmaker. So I had to lie and say I was 21, even though I was 23. But he was very nice. In fact, Carson, Schlock is the only movie he ever gave permission for a quote. So on all the advertising, it said, really wild, really funny, Johnny Carson.
That's really cool. All right, that about does it. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to our graphic designer, Todd Zimmer, my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Joe Kennedy, the mythological mensch himself, John Landis, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you. But wait just a minute. This is just the entrance to the rabbit hole. No need to stop now, because we're on a roll. Join us as we descend down, down, down on this filmic week-long deep dive. Another way to dive even deeper is to get thee directly to either Alan Arkish episode, wherein the director of Rock and Roll High School and the Temptations talks about his top 10 albums of all time and waxes psychedelic about his time working for Bill Graham at the Fillmore East in an episode entitled Fillmore Feast. And don't forget, there are 5 upcoming episodes of the John Landis tapes. That's a whole lot of movies to go. Of course, if you're subscribing to our Patreon, then you already know to keep your ears peeled throughout the week, because this Monday continues the Film Deep Dive with our Patreon-only wildcard episode, 10 Minutes of Landis, where the only outtake assemblage of the John Landis material is poured directly into your ear holes, including one massive foot-and-mouth faux pas on my part. Not to mention Wednesday's incredible Patreon-only episode of Discograffiti Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major, wherein we'll be covering Palmer Rocky's movie album, the self-produced soundtrack to a now-lost movie that wraps up the dive in predictably what-the-fuck style. That's patreon.com/discograffiti. This is an entirely listener-supported show, and I offer a full, no-questions-asked, money-back guarantee. So if you dug this episode, you don't have an excuse. Check it out right this second. Thank you so much in advance. And be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, March 31st, we're coming at you with part 1 of an interview with the great Sergio Diaz from Os Mutantes. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti.